This is an exciting turning point in our course. It is finally time to write, and you have one job as a writer. That is to draw on your reader and speak from the heart. That is typically accomplished through a very simple writing structure. We have our hook, which are the exciting opening lines. Your thesis, which is the main point, following the hook. Then strengths, examples, accomplishments that illustrate the thesis, accompanied by a whole lot of self-reflection, what you learned, how you've grown. Finally, the conclusion, preferably referencing back to the hook. Now, many students struggle with the vibe of a personal statement, and there's a reason. We don't often write creatively in school. You've most likely spent the last 10 years learning how to write academically, but the vast majority of college admission essays, they are not academic, they're creative. And one really quick way to fight the urge to write an academic paper is to start your entire essay with I. I feel, or I remember, or I think. So you notice the common denominator, I. Make you a little uncomfortable to do that? That's good, because I want you to start practicing how to write creatively. Let's try that out. Your reader can feel what you're feeling and connect with you so much more when you talk in first person. In the end, your opening line will likely not start with I, but it totally can. I really just want you to remember the purpose. For the admission panel to get to know you, the applicant, and you'll need to use I in order to talk about yourself, right? So try that as an exercise, knowing you can completely rewrite those opening lines later. Almost every essay asks two questions, what and how. Often it's what happened and how did it shape you. If you address both what happened and how you grew, your essay, I promise you, it's going to be on the right track. As for how to organize your what and how information, there are two structures students utilize, the narrative structure and the montage structure. Which structure you use depends on the information and prompt, and honestly, the word count. So a narrative structure typically focuses on a singular event, whereas a montage structure references several events or activities that share a common theme. Let's dive a little deeper with some examples. So let's say I'm addressing a prompt that asks about leadership. If I use a narrative structure, I would tell about the one time I was working with students at a Boys and Girls Club to organize an event, and how when we ran short on money to fund it, I took charge to organize a fundraising campaign, complete with all the details of what I led and how that helped me develop some traits, responsibility, talking to adults. So alternatively, if I use a montage structure, I might reference this Boys and Girls Club fundraising story and its details briefly, but also include two more examples of my leadership, like when I was president of the biology club or how I babysat every Saturday, along with the most important part of an essay, regardless of structure, what I learned and how I grew as a person. One structure is not better than the other as long as you have enough self-reflection, but typically you need a higher word count to make a montage structure work. You're explaining more activities in montage structure. So if you had a pretty limited word count, you'd probably not be able to describe much experience, or worse, you would sacrifice self-reflection. Don't do that. I tend to encourage a narrative structure, one story, over a montage structure for everything except the longer personal statement. Again, follow your gut. There's no right or wrong when it comes to structure. But speaking of which, I do have some do's and don'ts of writing. Let's get into those now. First, the do's. Do use an active voice. It's more vigorous. That's a fun word. It means full of energy. And don't you want that infused throughout your writing? You can and you will. Just remember as you write, you're the main character. You're the star. So how do you know when you're using an active voice and acting as this star main character? It's when you're the subject doing the action rather than the action being done to you. So for example, here's an active voice. I will always remember my trip to Peru. And passive voice, my visit to Peru will always be remembered. So the subject there is Peru. And it's just not as effective because you are not the main character. In this case, Peru is. As a good rule, go with this writing technique, the right branching sentence. It's where you start with subjects and verbs. That way you don't delay the main subject, probably you, and what is happening, probably to you. You get into the action right away and grab a reader's attention. Do use definitive language. Avoid words like sort of, tend to, could have, seem to, rather than, I'm not usually late. Say, I'm usually on time. Rather than, I thought playing basketball wouldn't ever be useful. Say, I didn't see the value in playing basketball until wherever that goes. With the first example of non-committal language, you aren't saying exactly what you think. In the second example, you are saying exactly how you feel. and it's way more powerful. This happens because students often feel uncomfortable writing about themselves. You may feel like you're trauma dumping when you talk about the hard stuff, or bragging when you're talking about the good stuff. And it's like, wow, you just cannot win with that kind of attitude, right? So, in an effort to not draw so much attention to yourself, you might unconsciously speak around an idea or sort of hide behind words like sort of. But schools, they really want to know this information, and you want to be memorable. Next, do watch your tenses. Okay, I have been guilty of messing this one up many times. I start out in the present tense and move to the past tense by the end because I'm not paying attention. And it's especially easy to do this when you take breaks as you write, which you will. The key to be consistent with your tenses is to check back over your work before you start writing again. And honestly, you will catch this one once you revise. Just make sure that if you are writing in past tense, it stays in the past tense. If you're writing in present tense, keep it there. These aren't admission disqualifiers, but you would distract a reader from the story with grammar and usage issues. Not a good thing as you apply to an academic program, right? So here's a little pro tip. If you are summarizing past actions, use present tense. For example, rather than I froze and scanned the auditorium, go with I freeze and scan the auditorium. It's storytelling, and it brings the reader into the space and time themselves. It allows them to connect more deeply to the experience. All right, another do, have a main point. Well, I've drudged on and on about how this isn't academic writing, and it isn't. You do still need to have a clear point to your essay. One may call this a thesis. Again, it is more creative writing, so I'm going to use the words purpose or main idea. If thesis helps you wrap your mind around the approach, go with it. Bottom line, your essay needs to be just focused on a main point. If you begin to list several learning moments, your essay is likely too broad. Another takeaway, these are not academic, so there doesn't need to be 5 paragraphs with formal intros and conclusions. A paragraph should have a new topic or focus, but beyond that, the number of paragraphs and how you structure them, totally up to you. Again, it's creative writing. If anything, it really just needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Another do, use a word bank. Just like sometimes we lean on a good old thesaurus, but not too much, word banks can help conjure up some powerful thoughts. In your digital workbook, you'll find some helpful word banks on feelings and actions. That way you can avoid saying collaborate 3 times or a lackluster, I felt happy. When it comes to using synonyms, don't go nuts trying out every nuanced esoteric word at your disposal. You like that? All right, you want to sound like yourself, right? That's the most important piece. Don't try to impress with a slew of big old words. But every once in a while, you might want to swap one out for another if it feels true to your speaking style. And if you do just happen to speak in that way, using larger, unusual words, then that is you. And that is the most important takeaway. Now, some don'ts. Don't rewrite the prompt when you open up your essay. I have demonstrated my leadership skills as a camp counselor. It's just a waste of words. Get right into it. Every summer for a week, I become the stand-in mom for 8 10-year-olds. That tells the story of leadership, and you're going to explain it as you move on in your essays. Colleges already know the question. Plus, you will select the prompt you're answering in the application so there's no confusion. They'll see the little button highlighted, and then you'll respond. Don't be redundant. I see this mistake all the time. Here's an example. I truly and strongly believe. Pick one word. And truly believe, it implies that you can skeptically believe, right? The redundancy actually makes your thought totally confusing. Do you believe? Do you not? So just pick one word, make it the right word. This will happen in the revising section. Don't worry about the order of events if you're free writing. If you haven't outlined your essay and you sit down to write, remember that at that stage, it's all about quantity rather than quality. Your story may take a chronological approach, meaning in the order you experienced it, or you may copy and paste parts of your story so that you're introducing something that happened and writing a flashback explaining how that event came to be. There is no right or wrong way to organize a timeline, and you can figure it out later. Don't use a lot of formatting. First off, there is no need to use a special font, so forget that right now. It's all getting copied and pasted into the application's existing format. And oftentimes, certain formatting looks super strange upon submission. I remember seeing the number 9 in lieu of quotation marks on the apps I used to review. So try to avoid quotation marks, bolds, indents whenever possible so your final copy looks clean, and again, the reader isn't distracted by random symbols you didn't mean to include. Try not to use a negative voice. Okay, I don't mean be peppy and positive the whole time. This is really more closely related to my earlier point about being direct and committal with your language. For example, rather than say, he wasn't honest, say, he was dishonest. You're tightening it up. Or instead of, I did not remember, say, I forgot. Writing more directly will often help with staying under your word count as well. All right, you know what? Let's talk about word count for a minute. Essays can be anywhere from 150 to 650 words. Don't let this stress you out more than it should. You will meet the word count, I promise you. You may struggle with staying under the maximum. It's uncommon that a student struggles with filling the page, so you can let that go probably too. But I promise you, you're going to come under the maximum with some revisions. When you begin to write with the word count in mind, you limit your creativity. As counterintuitive as it may feel, I want you to ignore the word count for the first draft or two. And you can think about it this way. You're trying to access all your thoughts and feelings about a prompt, but at the same time telling yourself to spare words, that is just not going to work. So give yourself permission to let those ideas flow and remind yourself, you're in the driver's seat. You decide what stays and goes in the end, and you will make the word count. A final word on this, draft one should focus on quantity over quality. Just get those words on the page to start. Here's a pro tip. You may write more if you take pen to paper over typing. So sure, it's more work to type it out later, but hey, if the words flow better earlier on when you're using, the old school method of writing, like journaling, it's worth the extra step. When you do sit down to write, aim for 30-minute blocks. If you're free writing without an outline, you may consider starting with a 10-minute goal to just write nonstop, eventually working your way up to 30 minutes. Again, we're focusing on the quantity to start. And if you find that you get writer's block, it'll happen, and you can't think up what to say next, please take a break. And when you resume, try this. Record yourself talking into your phone. Even consider walking while you do it, maybe with a friend who will just listen to you. Fresh air, exercise, open space, that can get words flowing. And you can also type your words onto the page from your recording later. Yes, it's more work, but you'll have more words to work with and maybe some more creative content. So it might be worth it.